Welcome to the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast with our co-hosts Don McKinnon and Eric Malloy, where we look at church revitalization in real time.
Welcome back to the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast. We are running through our list of movements in church revitalization. We've already done 1 through 5. And so if you've been on here, you know that we are talking about things that are helping the movement of church revitalization. We're not trying to pick apart anybody. We're not trying to pull anybody apart. We're just pointing out things that are going on right now within the church, big capital C, for good of church revitalizers out there. Things to give you guys hope. So we're just going to jump right back into it.
Can I, an aside, do you have the name of our pod? I mean, it's kind of wordy. I mean, if we're honest, the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast.
Yeah.
You don't have that written down in your notes?
I don't.
I would stumble over that every single time.
Yeah.
If I didn't have it written. I'm just impressed. Sorry, guys. ADD kicks in.
Yeah. Even though I am going to just put the initials on the podcast, so when people are looking at their iPhones or whatever device it'll say, the PCRP.
Yeah.
But
so sorry. Go ahead.
Right.
I think you're up. You're up for number. You have your even number. So
yes, yeah. So I'm here with number 6 on our list, and this is established churches that can redeem the name of their church. Usually have the good history of their church to fall back on, and have members of town leadership that want to meet with you, and you can get an idea of what your church can do in the community. So that's kind of wordy, so let me just kind of back up. So basically, if you're in a church, if you have a revitalization, I don't want to say project, but if you're in a revitalization plant, we'll call it, and you're trying to get people to realize, like Eric has said in a previous podcast, people thought his church was closed. People thought my church was closed because it was so inwardly focused, so few things being done. People think, my parking lot in Sutton, people park in there for birthday parties in the towns, which I kind of laugh at, because in a way it's kind of like people driving by and they'll see like people parked in the parking lot while we're running church that aren't in the church, but they're sitting there going, oh, there's 20 cars in there, But what ends up happening is you're able to take that good name. Now, as I said, you can redeem the name. So if your church has had a good history in the past, even if it's had bad history, you can still take that name and make it mean something for the glory of God. Now, we want to make sure we get that out there, the glory of God, because it's not what Pastor Eric's doing for First Church, or Pastor Don's doing for First Baptist, or whatever you're doing for your church. God is getting all the glory in this. In many cases, though, in some cases, and Mark Clifton, we know Mark Clifton gets we should be paying him, or he should be paying us.
I think he should be paying us. That's how that works.
But Mark Clifton has come out many times and said that he is all for a church reclaiming its name, but in extreme cases, the name can be so badly dragged through the mud, it's irredeemable. And there's like a checklist, and maybe that should be a podcast.
That would be a good episode. Yeah. Well, so like I said, you've heard me say before, I came out of the planting world to replant, which that's a whole story unto itself. One of the things that I think helps as an established church, or even as a replant, is I have a reason to be here. I have an excuse to be here, so to speak. When we planted a church, when you're talking to people who aren't Christians, who don't have a church background, trying to explain planting a church is a nightmare. Because you're like, no, we're here to start a church. Well, then people say, well, aren't there already churches here?
Yep.
Well, then what do you say? Well, yeah, but they're not any good, so you should come to my... It's hard. Well, no, there's lots of people, and there's... I've heard people, well, why doesn't the church planter just connect with the established church and make something happen? Which you hear, and so one of the benefits of being part of an established church is that I have a reason to be here. I kind of have a natural in already in the community.
Yep.
I don't have to say, well, I'm part of fill in the blank church, and we're starting something new. You should let me be involved. I just simply say, well, hey, I'm the pastor of First Church. Oh yeah, we'd love to have you. And so it's a nice natural in that I didn't get. Now, yes, of course, you still have to work hard. You still have to, establish, people to understand why you love and care about the community. But it's not. You have to you're already halfway there because you're a pastor of a church that's in the community. So that is also something I think that kind of goes along with here is that town leadership is more willing to meet with you because you have some I don't want to say clout, but you have some name recognition.
Yeah.
Even if it's unknown name recognition or potentially bad at some point, you at least have, hey, I'm the pastor of First Church, and I can point to you where that is.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So you get some natural credibility. Credibility, that's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
That
I think you said cred.
Nice. It happens. So,
but yeah, I mean, I understand that. I mean, in Sutton right now, it's been hard trying to connect with people. We did the chain of lights. We talked about that on a previous podcast, and it was like getting into it though, because of the history, because of what the previous leadership did at the church. Like one thing about Sutton, and one thing, I mean, I know it's everywhere, but probably more so in New England is, especially in the small towns, is you have small towns, you have the names of people that have been there, like their family has been there for 100, 200, 300 years. So we have that in Sutton. It's like you look at the list of people, like there's history books that show like the list of names of people that were in Sutton that were founding members of the church, but they were also founding members of the town. Right. And in fact, Benjamin Marsh, who was the one of the founding fathers of Sutton, was the founding pastor of the church. So my church is tied into the history,
right?
And so you go there and you see this big stained glass window in the front at the pulpit in memory of Putnam, which is another big name in town. And George Putnam, I think it was George Putnam. Well, that's who the window's to. But there was a Putnam who was famous Revolutionary War general, related family. But there's all these families that are there, and that was the thing, like with the chain of lights. There are families that were hurt by the previous leadership, and so when we went to join, it was kind of interesting. Like I sent like a what I would say is a detailed thing of what we were going to do. And then one of the members at the church looked at the paper and said, "Yeah, they didn't mention anything. Like they just said, oh, First Baptist Church Sutton, but they didn't mention anything." So it was kind of like one of those things, and you're trying to redeem the name, but it's tough when the people that you need to be making that reconciliation with don't want it, or there's just, I don't know, like so much hurt. So for established churches trying to make those connections, if you're in a revitalization, understand that one of your first ministries is going to be a ministry of reconciliation with the town, with the city, and find out those ways that you can connect with those people to do something, be some kind of beacon of light for the people.
Well, on the flip side of that, so let me, to go against my nature, and to be less doom and gloom here.
Ooh. You heard it here
It
first.
happens every now and then. A total aside, I was watching. Did you watch the two Bills about Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells? Did you watch the 30 for 30 with those guys?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was incredible. So they had a nickname for Bill Belichick when he was coaching the Giants defense. They just called him Doom, because every time he came around, it was always like, this is what we did wrong. This is, you know what I mean? Like he plans for the worst case scenario of everything. So when I heard that, I was like, see, I knew that man was a genius. Right, because anyway, so I digress. But that's I tend to plan for the worst case scenario always. Maybe it's 9 years in the military will probably do that to you. But so one of the benefits that we've had here at First Church is that we've been able to be involved in a lot of stuff in the community, just simply because I'm the pastor of First Church. Perfect example. Last year, Bunker Hill Day. Those of you guys who are outside of Boston, outside of Charlestown, are probably like, what the heck is Bunker Hill Day? Bunker Hill Day is like the biggest day on the calendar in Charlestown.
Isn't it coming up?
In June.
June, yes.
June. The parade's on June 10th. But they will say, without Bunker Hill Day, there's no July 4th. There's no Independence Day. I mean, that is, which there's some reality to that. I mean,
True.
That's
True.
the
Very
first
true.
victory that we had at all in the Revolutionary War. So it's huge here. So last year, 2 years ago, we just kind of were part of it. Last year, they changed the parade route, and it went right in front of our church building. Now, they're not doing that this year because we're on Green Street. As you guys don't have no idea what Charlestown geography is like, a ridiculously steep hill.
Yes.
That our church is on. And the parade walked up it last year. Nobody wants to walk up it this year, which is fine, I understand. But they changed the parade. We got the parade route changed, not us. People in the community got the parade route changed, and it walked right in front of our church. So we had a little reception area. We gave out hot dogs and snow cones and all this other stuff, which, it's hot in June. So that was really nice. And so that's kind of a benefit. Also, the same weekend, I got to take part in the service. So we start up at St. Francis, and we do like an ecumenical service, and then we march through the town over to the Bunker Hill, and we have the ceremony at the Bunker Hill Monument, which I got to be part of last year because I'm a pastor in the community. Like, so here I am marching with the general of the Massachusetts National Guard, who was our keynote speaker, in like the third row. I mean, I'm like, why in the world am I here? But it's because we have that name recognition. So there is some benefit. I mean, pastors, definitely, like, I know, like, wisdom has always taught us that if your church is dying and it's struggling, that you change the name and then shut down, and then you turn it,
Yep.
You come back with a new name, and the community goes, whoa, that must be a new church. I'm going to go check it out. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. If your church is dying, your community doesn't think about your church enough to care about a name change. They really don't. Like, you're not gonna change the name, change the colors, and everybody in the community goes, oh wow, that's a new church. I should go check that out. Like,
No.
that's not how it works. Keep the name, but make a difference in the community,
Right.
in the name of the church. Because yes, it is all for the name of the glory of God. But people who don't know Jesus don't understand that.
Right.
They say, wow, that church is nice. They do good stuff in our community. Right. I mean, and that's the case, is that you develop a reputation, which then, of course, you use to give glory to God. And so that's important, to understand. So we do get a lot of opportunities simply because of who we are,
Right.
not because of who I am, but because I'm pastor of this whole historic church. So,
Yeah, and I mean, as we're going as we're recording this, like this week, I just updated my church logo, and I know that's not going to attract anybody.
people be like, whoa, look at the new logo, we're
Yeah.
coming.
But like, I did it because, like, if you Google First Baptist Church Sutton, you can see the sign, and the sign's got this very, like, I got an email from a guy who was King James only, asking me if I was King James only, and I was like, I like the King James, I like the ESV, I like, but seriously, it's like, certain ways, though, a church does put its signage out there, it will attract certain Christians out there. I want to be careful how I say this, but it was very not flattering.
I'm looking it up right now.
Oh, okay.
While we're at it,
I actually have a picture, I think, on Facebook, but yeah, it was one of those things, and I was talking to my trustees about it, and they're like, "Well, we don't have the money for it." And I turned around, and Vistaprint had a sale this week on banners, and I don't care that the banner's probably not going to fit the whole sign, because it shouldn't have to fit the whole sign. But I'm thinking to myself, I bought 3 banners. I'm putting one on either side of that sign and one up on the handicap ramp that faces the road.
Yeah, if you've never seen his church, his handicap ramp.
Yeah, and so
faces the road.
And so that's what I'm doing, because that way there, people are going to see something, and sometimes it does say, because if they think your building's closed, but then you're putting signage out there, new signage, that's saying something. We're planning. Actually, I've got to talk to you after we record. I just remembered something my wife wanted me to ask you, but this is the thing: is when you start doing things, you start painting, all that stuff. That's not only good stewardship for your building, that's also good stewardship for the community, because now you're beautifying your place. This is kind of a funny way this is work. This is beautifying your place and helping make your community look better. So then people are sitting there and they start saying, well, they're taking pride in their building. I think we need to touch up with paint. And then all of a sudden you start seeing no, gentrifying is a bad word, but you just, like that word. You just see a change. Resurgence. Yeah.
Right. A mistake on our part. We have 2 of them. So first of all, when I first became the pastor, we tried to capitalize on the history. And we started with this slogan, "Help us make history again."
I've seen that out on the signs.
That was terrible. It was an awful idea. We've gotten rid of that because the history of our church didn't resonate with anybody. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody cared, right? Because they know, no context to it. So, oops, lesson learned. So we got rid of that. So we have this massive sign. If you've been by our property, we have a massive sign that's on stakes in our front yard, right? Front yard. It's not really much of a yard.
It's a postage stamp.
It's a postage stamp. I mean, we are in Boston. Anyway, so a kid who was working for me before mismeasured. No, he measured it correctly. We just conveyed the measurements of the sign incorrectly to the guy who was making our sign. So when they brought it here, it didn't fit above our door like we wanted it to. So we're like, well, what are we going to do? Well, the guy who made it was like, what if I just put it on a post and I put it in the dirt over there, and then we'll just make another sign that fits right above your door. So we have this massive sign that we put a light on that looks really pretty. It looks really nice when you drive by the property. Total accident. So yes, make history again. Oops, that was a mistake. Too big of a sign. Oops, but that mistake worked out well for us. I mean, so it's, I don't know. I mean, just don't try to be too cute, pithy. Like, I don't know why I was doing that. That's not really, doesn't really work for me. So
yeah, Well, and that's the thing. Like, we have a banner that advertises, because we have a website. The church didn't have a website when we got there,
neither did ours.
And so I made a banner, and it had kind of the slogan I was thinking of. Come grow with us, and that actually grow is one of our core values now. But I've realized, and I've actually taken this one from Mark Clifton. Yep, we owe us a check, Mark. But we took this this new slogan, which is something new happening in someplace old.
Okay.
So what we're trying to, we're here, we're the same church, but we're trying to do something new. We're trying to be the church, create a church that is what Christ wants for this community. And you know what? This is an opportunity to come in here and join us at ground level. If you're sitting there and you're like, wow, the church has been just doing something, that my church is not meeting my needs, or this church is just really inwardly focused, and no matter what I say, I get shot down. That's probably the only time I would say a person should transfer, is if the church is unwilling to grow and you're getting shot down at every turn. and it might be, the old Jeff Foxworthy, you might be a redneck, you might be a Christian in need of a new church
or if your church sends you.
Yeah.
Your church commissions you to go.
Yeah.
Like that should be,
and that was one thing, like Meeting House where we came from, the pastor was asking, is there anybody we can send with you? And I because we're 50 miles
That's
from
tough.
there.
That's tough.
Even in the Mansfield, Attleboro area where I think that might even be, that would be the middle area between the two churches.
That's still a long commute.
Yeah.
It's a long commute.
So I don't think anybody would, but it was that type of thing. Like we were looking for people that would be willing to be commissioned to go with us. But that's the thing is in those churches, that's a way that you go. And I mean we're kind of like off. We did.
Oh man,
off
we're
on
way
it.
off.
Yeah.
All right, well let's jump. So our next one is we've already beat this one to death. Listen to the last episode. Revitalizations are going deep in their theological backgrounds and history because many of the members have lost their love for Christ, preaching and teaching from the pulpit because they're not really used to learning from the Bible. And so feel-good sermons generally just don't cut it. I mean, this was our church in a nutshell. I mean, I was the pastor in waiting for about a month, and I would come to the service. Bro, it was painful. Like, there's one in particular. If you ever met my wife, she comes across really prim and proper and buttoned down. She comes across very prim and proper and buttoned down. Listen, you've heard me on here. Do you really think that work, like any kind of marriage like that would work? No, right? My wife's a clown too. Like she's funny. She has a good sense of humor. She just plays nice a lot better than I do. So we were sitting. The guy was, I don't even know what he was talking. Dude, I don't even know what he was talking about. But he was talking about weeding God's garden. And I see you guys can't see the look on Don's face. It is one of like I literally know what you're talking about. So he was talking about how God's garden needs to be weeded and that there's weeds that need to be pulled. And I'm not really sure where he was going with that metaphor. Like it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so Sarah nudges me in the middle of the service, and she was like, "Maybe somebody needs to tell him he's a weed and he needs to be pulled because he's part of the problem here," which. She wasn't wrong, but like in the middle of the service, like I had to like stifle my laugh with like a cough. You get, I don't know if you've ever done that when you're like, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. But she wasn't wrong. Like that's the issue is that people try this feel good or try this, hey, let's try to be like the culture. But the problem is we're not good at that.
No.
We become a country club and not a very good one.
Yep.
I mean, churches are bad country clubs,
and that's always been my thing. And I know when I was starting out, and I went to Bible college, and that was one of the things that the college I was at had kind of set, and that was my thing. I was sitting there calling churches country clubs because that's what they were. People come in. I remember I heard a pastor, now probably about 6-7 years ago, and he was talking about he got into an established church. Now, this was an established church that was still living, still breathing, wasn't one in need of a revitalization, but he was talking about how he got in there and the people did not like the direction because he was being more theological and not, happy, feel-good type sermons. And people were leaving. And he was like, fine. And he remembered, this is the only reason why I'm bringing this up is, talking about the country club, is the person was like, well, I want this thing that my, great-grandmother gave to the church, and it's up in the attic. So he went to go, he asked the secretary, well, how do I get up to the attic? And she told him. And he said he got up there, and he walked up there, and he said it was only an 18-inch walkway because the whole attic was full of all this stuff that this church had been given by members and families. And because the members and families couldn't depart from it, all this stuff was being kept, and he said it was at this point where like the town was like, oh, well, you can't get rid of history and all this. So he called the town in and he was like, listen, I want you to see what's up there. They went up there and they said, what? They couldn't believe it because at any point the ceiling could collapse in on itself because all this weighted stuff. Like,
that's crazy. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. But that's still crazy.
But that was the thing.
Wow.
So we talk about people and feelings and all of that, and it does go down. What is really at the heart? It's got to be teaching the Bible, being deep theologically. It's good to know the histories of the church. I think it's great. I know I'm the 63rd pastor of my church. I can tell you that there was, my church was a retirement church for many pastors. You look at the history, there's like 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Benjamin Marsh, the founder of the church, the longest serving pastor, 40 years.
Wow. That was my goal for a while at my church. And then I actually read it. And we have a guy who's here for 51 years. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to make that.
Yeah.
That puts me into my 80s.
There was another pastor, I'm trying to think here, another pastor, 26 or 27 years. The pastor I just replaced, which they say, it's always hard to replace a long-serving pastor. He's got the third longest tenure at 20 years.
Oh, wow. Our second's 34. So I think that's feasible.
Yeah.
It'll be tough. So I might be like the fourth is kind of my goal. So, yeah, so we have to go deeper with our theology and our history because we have to teach our people. We have to grow. All churches should do that, not just established. We should teach our people the deep truth of God.
And this is why also networks, certain networks are growing out there because they're looking at churches where the church has gone and where the church needs to return to.
Which is funny, which goes right into our next point.
Right. Cross-denominational and interdenominational ties. So revitalization isn't just tied to one denomination. It's tied to all denominations. It's tied into the different networks out there, like we've talked about in a previous podcast. The Gospel Coalition, Acts 29, 9 Marks. These
Overseed, who we're connected with.
Yep. There are these networks that have been for planting, but now they're realizing revitalization. What's happening now is this is a way for pastors to connect with one another, be able to lift up one another, be able to sit there and say, I know what you're going through. We have two guys that we meet in our cohort, Gary and Jonathan, and we sit there. We meet one Saturday a month. Have breakfast and discuss a book that we're reading and discuss about what's going on in our churches. What's the good thing, what's the bad thing, and you know what? There are good friendships developing. There are good things that happen. Gary, he actually happens to be the son of members of my old church.
That's awesome.
And it's kind of that weird little circle of life type thing. It shows how small really our Christian community is, but that's what happens. We're building these good friendships. In fact, I know they're probably listening to us right now. So hi guys, but this is one of the strong points. One of the strong things going on in revitalization.
And we're not all the same denomination. You and I do belong. We're dually aligned, but you and I both belong to the same denomination.
Yep.
And some of these other guys don't.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They belong to their congregational. They're another flavor of Baptist.
Yep.
They're and so that's one of the things that we have to look at is it becomes cross denominational, which I think is wonderful. I mean, I think it's great. 9, we're not going to beat this one to the ground because you just got to listen a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
More books are being written on the subject, and it makes it known, and it makes it we know that there's a need. We shared 10 are great. There's plenty more that you and I both could share.
Yeah.
Right? But there's plenty of books that are being written.
And there's more being written every every month, it seems.
Right.
Like I look at, I just go into the list. There's one that just came out. It's on my to buy list. It's not even listed as church revitalization, but it's small church. Oh, I can't even think of what it is. But Kevin Vetter, I think, is the author, and he talks about making those connections, making those small network connections. What can you learn from this small church that's going to help your small
Right.
church? It's not just about being a large church anymore. It's about being happy with the flock you got. In fact, what is that old saying? I forget who said it, but be happy with the church you have, not the church you wish you had.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I've heard that a few times. So that's probably one of those ones that's from antiquity. So yeah, if you want some resources, a couple episodes ago,
Yep, we did. We did our
I believe it was
top 10 books.
it was episode 3. So check that out. That's a good one. And then finally,
And finally, what you are listening to. And I'm not saying, we're the be all and end all. If you're listening to us, you are listening to a podcast. We are one of maybe a handful of podcasts out there right now that are trying to put new material out there weekly or bi-weekly. There is 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. There is Revitalize and Replant, which we've talked to death about, by Tom Rayner and Mark Clifton and Jonathan Howe. And that is a great resource if you get a chance to listen to it. There is another revitalization podcast out there, which I think is more, it's from Texas, and it kind of brings in a lot of the Texas flavor. But there you go, Texas, it's down there near the Bible Belt, and you'd think that, it's God and country in Texas, but they're an area where they need to have revitalization,
right.
And they're putting stuff out there. There is Clifton does another revitalization podcast, which just launched not
is
too
it
long
Replanter?
ago. Yes.
Replanter?
Yes. I think it's Replant.
Replant,
Yeah.
something along those lines. And then EST, Sam Rayner,
Yep.
which is more for the established church, but they cover some revitalization topics.
Yep, they've got some good topics there. There's 200 churches out there.
Right.
That's a good podcast.
And then, of course, my favorite, the Practical
Church Revitalization podcast.
It's my personal favorite, But so I think there's a lot more information out there.
Yeah,
now
there's a number, and it's growing. And that's the biggest thing right now is that if you are in a church revitalization, consider yourself at ground zero, because even though, like we've talked about, that there have been throughout history these signs, you hear stuff like Jim Simbler and others that have gone into churches and basically revitalized these churches. Matt Chandler, even, if I remember rightly,
the Village Church,
Village Community Church, was it called?
First Baptist Church of Village. I don't know. It was something like that. I listened to his story once. It was of something village, whatever, not Flower Mound, but whatever village it was in. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And so then it became the Village Church.
But this is the thing, is that it's been going on for ages, but it's only been within, like we've said, probably the last 5 years that it's really starting to take off. In fact, Jim Harrell, who is a mentor of ours, he pointed out recently to us that 10 years ago, when he started the Overseed Network, he did not think that church revitalization would be the way it is now. And so that's the thing, is it's taking off. People are getting the vision. Mark Clifton talks about taking seminary students right now and talking to them, mentoring them, and these guys they're thinking about church planting, and he's kind of showing them the bones of an established church that's in need of revitalization, and they're saying, we want to do that. They're going in there, they're falling in love. It's mid-century buildings, he calls them. They're falling in love with mid-century buildings, legacy buildings, which would be, well, yours is mid-century, mine's a legacy building.
Oh, mine's a legacy building. It's just mid-century remodeled, thanks to the fire.
Yeah. You got steel bones in there now.
We do have steel bones in there now. Go all the way down to granite. It's crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, that's it. We hope, we know that this took a while to do a few podcasts of this list of movements, but we hope you are seeing that, there is a lot of great stuff going on within church revitalization, within the church itself. This isn't, we're not saying that if you're a church planter, we're looking down on you. We are saying, if you're a church planter, that's what you're called to. If you're an established church pastor, that's what you're called to. If you're called to a revitalization, that's what you're called to. Just as God gave different people, different, teachers and apostles and evangelists to the church, he's given revitalizers and planters and established church pastors to those churches to help those churches at that time. And right now, if you're in a church revitalization, we're with you. We're right there. We're on the front lines with you. We're doing the grunt work. Eric and me, we've got that military background, so we know you got to get dirty sometimes. You got to, the best generals are the generals that like to get into the fight. Think of Patton. So with that, we are going to say goodbye, God bless, and we hope that if you like the Practical Church Revitalization podcast, that you'll hit that subscribe, leave us a comment, hit 5 stars, leave a comment on iTunes, get the word out there. All right, we're going to say goodbye and God bless. The Practical Church Revitalization podcast is sponsored by Overseed. Overseed's vision is to see growing historic churches in every New England town reaching their communities for Christ. If you want to be part of a mentorship program and you live in the New England area, please go to overseed.org and find out how you can get in contact with one of the hub churches in the area or one of the many pastoral network cohorts that are run in the area. Once again, go to overseed.org for more information on the Overseed Network.